Good afternoon. Welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Daryl Stranger, filling in for Melissa Ridgen. Today we're putting harvesting rights in focus. From lobster to eels to moose and then salmon, APTN News has covered a lot of issues ongoing across the country as Indigenous harvesters fight to exercise their treaty rights as well as kick out salmon farms in their territory. We are updating some of those stories here today, starting on the East Coast, so let's get right into it. It's been a rough couple of years for Mi'kmaq lobster fishers. Their boats sunk, fishers were assaulted, property was destroyed, and in October of 2020, Mi'kmaq fishers in Nova Scotia were once again the target of violence by non-Indigenous commercial fishermen. Several dozen people surrounded 2 lobster storage facilities while Mi'kmaq fishermen were barricaded inside. Angel Moore reported this story.
When Brendan Maloney of Sabaganagati First Nation tried to drive to this lobster storage facility, he came across about 200 people blocking the entrance. Maloney posted this video on Facebook criticizing the RCMP's lack of intervention.
You guys might as well take your badges off and join them.
As darkness set in, a van was set on fire and the crowd soon dispersed. The storage facility, known as a pound, is the buyer of Sabaganagati First Nations lobster. Meanwhile, about an hour away, people surrounded another lobster pound. Mi'kmaq lobster harvester Jason Marr was trapped inside. He live-streamed it on Facebook.
There's hundreds of them, and the cops are with them, saying I should leave and let them take my lobsters. I told them I'm not leaving until I leave with my lobsters.
Police can be seen standing by as crates of lobster are removed. Marr said about 3,000 pounds of lobster was destroyed. Jolene Marr, Jason's sister, confronted the police.
You're law! And you're not upholding it!
The RCMP say they are investigating several incidences of threats, mischief, and damage to property. The Sabaganagati First Nation launched their moderate livelihood fishery last month that has met with consistent backlash from commercial fishermen, despite the fact that the Supreme Court upheld the Mi'kmaq treaty right to hunt, fish, and gather to earn a moderate livelihood. Chief Mike Sack spoke with media.
Last night, anything could happen to anyone. Like, people could have died last night, which is, somebody's going to be held accountable, and we'll be taking further action.
The fear is that as Mi'kmaq continue to enforce their treaty rights, incidents like this will only continue.
Now, Nova Scotia prosecutors announced the 25 people charged for ransacking a lobster pound and destroying a Mi'kmaq lobster catch while a Mi'kmaq fisher was stuck inside will avoid criminal records. A Mi'kmaq chief calls restorative justice a double standard. Once again, Angel Moore reports.
25 people face charges of break-and-enter, unlawful assembly, and forcible entry. They will avoid court if they participate in a restorative justice.
The double standards are unreal. It's, I don't even like using the word Canadian anymore. It's just...
Sabaganagati Chief Mike Sack believes justice will not be served by going this route.
And then I just learned today that restorative justice is something that people are pushing for, because they were trying to take another route with them and they were going to get off scot-free.
Not so, says senior Crown Attorney Brian Cox.
We retain the option to continue with the prosecution at a later date if the individuals who have been referred are unsuccessful with restorative justice.
Restorative justice is the best option, senior Crown Attorney Rob Kennedy says.
It invokes traditional restorative approaches and education, understanding, community building, and we felt that was the most important aspect of this case.
The Mi'kmaq fisherman who was surrounded inside the pound does not want to meet with the accused, but Kennedy says the process will continue.
It will involve members of the Indigenous community participating, particularly individuals that are involved in the fishery, elders from the community, as well as the Mi'kmaq Legal Support Network itself.
The executive director of the Mi'kmaq Legal Support Network, Paula Marshall, supports restorative justice for the 25 men.
This is a really serious event that happened, And though it may not be reflected necessarily in the charges that were laid, we want to make sure that there is proper education, that there is accountability, and that Mi'kmaq needs will be heard and met.
A hearing is scheduled for next September for an update of the restorative justice process. However, the Crown expects more time will be needed.
All right, now back in July of 2021, National Chief Roseanne Archibald got an up-close look at what happened on the water for Mi'kmaq fishers. Once again, here's Angel Moore with that story.
Community member Angela Sloan-White is learning to fish with her own tags. She feels great about it, but is worried.
Oh, well, of course it makes you feel more proud. It's you're showing your community that, you know, you can get out there and practice your rights and hopefully not have any problems doing that.
Shai Francis says officers are around the wharf every day. She spoke with a fisheries officer last month.
When they told me they wanted to know when we were going out, I even asked them why, because you're going to handcuff us, you're going to charge us even before we get out in the water.
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans vessel was visible on St. Mary's Bay with lobster traps on board. Sabaganagati lobster harvesters are fishing for food, social, and ceremony, and were worried those traps had been seized from a community member. Francis says there's been more RCMP and DFO present in the last few weeks.
They're not working with us. If they were working with us, then we wouldn't have, our people wouldn't feel so attacked. When they're going up to our boats and they're asking for identification and whatnot, it feels like we've done something wrong when we actually didn't.
The Fisheries Department would not confirm they hauled traps, but did say if fisheries officers are hauling and inspecting fishing gear, they would be performing this lawful activity to ensure that gear is set and fishing is in compliance with the Fisheries Act. Chief Mike Sachs spoke with the department.
So I'm not sure if it was from other communities or untagged traps from other people as well. I'm not sure what it was. But they did tell me that they would not be taking our food, social, ceremonial lobster traps.
Sabaganagati's new food, social, and ceremony plan increases 3 lobster traps to 5, and the option to sell 25% of their catch to offset the costs. The plan has been sent to the Department of Fisheries, who told APTN they are reviewing the document. Sachs says,
we just sent in our plan to make them aware of it, and we approved it, so that's all that matters in my mind.
The Department of Fisheries did not confirm an increased presence of officers in the area, but did say high visibility patrols occurring in St. Mary's Bay, which may be perceived as an increase in fishery officer presence to promote compliance with the Fisheries Act. However, the RCMP did confirm an increased presence. Numerous vehicles are at the Metagan Fire Department. We have additional resources in the area as a precautionary measure in consideration of our role of promoting public safety and investigating criminal activity. However, Francis says she feels intimidated and fears her gear and catch will be seized.
They ain't here to protect us. They're here to monitor us to see when they're going to attack us and make any excuse to come after us.
As the fishery continues, the Mi'kmaq are protecting themselves. The Sabaganagati fisheries have a guardian zipping around the water on a Zodiac, making sure the Mi'kmaq fishery fleet is safe. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Saulnieville, Nova Scotia.
All right, so joining us now is Angel Moore, our Atlantic Canada reporter, to bring us an update on the Mi'kmaq lobster harvest situation and eel harvesting. She spoke to Melissa Ridgen earlier this week.
I'm so glad that you could join us, Angel. You know, it seems like this was in international headlines for a long time. It's hard to even guess when ago because of COVID, right? We've all kind of lost our sense of time, but it seemed like it was, you know, just a while ago that's all we were hearing about. Are things quiet now? What's going on?
Things are a bit quiet. People are commercial fishing right now. The tensions, though, this last year have been more so with the DFO officers than the non-Indigenous fishermen, who the first year, as we all know, reacted with a violence when the fishery was first launched. I was told by Mi'kmaq fishers that the DFO are really monitoring everything, even their commercial fishery, so the non-Indigenous fishers don't react. But they say it's very extreme, and they're waiting for when they start their treaty fishery to start to be worse. Again, like it was last fall when it was launched. We saw the story with Chief Archibald on the Mi'kmaq boat, and I was on that boat, and the DFO officers came and surrounded very aggressively. I'm a prairie girl, but to me that was quite dangerous.
I was going to say, that's my next question. You know, what? I mean, we see and experience a lot of things as journalists, but I mean, this has got to be right up there for you. That experience. You know, it's been a year. How is it still living in your head? What went on that day?
It was amazing. You know, I just sort of went on automatic mode. Everything happened very quickly. But unfortunately, I do not get seasick, and I love being on the water. And the Mi'kmaq fishers always make sure that I am safe, actually on and off the water.
That's a random and weird thing to have as a prairie girl, to not get seasick. That's good for you for that. I just wanted to, you know, we should remind people here, you know, the number of traps that we're talking about that the Mi'kmaq have in the context of the other traps that are out there for the non-Indigenous commercial fishers. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket, right? And we had biologists right here on InFocus at the height of all of this saying that this is not a matter, you know, the Mi'kmaq fishery has nothing to do with, you know, overfishing lobster stocks. It's a drop in the bucket. If they start before the lobster season, that also isn't a problem because the lobsters are soft-shelled there. It doesn't mean that it impacts lobster stocks. The hard-shell lobster season is just that the lobster market determined that that's when you make the most money, right? So the lobster season is just because that's when you're catching the hard-shell lobsters. So I just wanted to make that point known for people just to refresh their minds about that. You know, I want to ask too about the violence. Like we had the assaults, we had the destruction of property, we had the fire. Whatever happened with the people who were responsible for that? Where are we at?
Well, 25 people were charged for that day. It was actually about 200 non-Indigenous fishermen surrounded a lobster pound that was holding a Mi'kmaq lobster catch. And there was a Mi'kmaq fisher trapped inside with his catch. And he filmed it on Facebook Live, and we covered quite a few stories about that. And people were threatening to burn down the building. RCMP came, and there's videos all over social media showing the RCMP were standing there while these people pulled out this lobster catch, and another person's lobster catch was right next door, is an Asian businessman. They pulled out all this lobster and just dumped it all over the ground, and just wasted it all and damaged property. They damaged the van. Meanwhile, this fisherman was inside, terrified, on Facebook Live. His sisters and the other Mi'kmaq fishers went to this pound, which was southern Nova Scotia, and they started yelling at the RCMP, saying, like, why are you standing around? Why aren't you doing anything? It was unbelievable.
There was definitely a lot of backlash against the RCMP for that. Absolutely. Those guys have all gone to court now, though, too, right?
Yes, they've gone to court. Well, they didn't go to court. The prosecutor and the defense came to an agreement that they would face restorative justice instead of going to court.
Okay.
So that was the agreement, and if they do not complete the restorative justice, they will be back in court facing the charges.
What's that been met with by the Mi'kmaq fishers?
It has been met with disgust and another letdown with the justice system, another letdown with the Canadian government, and another letdown for treaty rights. So it was not well received. Yeah. The plan is the Mi'kmaq Legal Network is going to be involved with this restorative justice. These non-Indigenous fishermen or people will meet with Mi'kmaq elders, Mi'kmaq fishermen, and learn the traditions and learn Mi'kmaq culture. It will be interesting, though, because this is a situation where the victim does not want to partake in restorative justice, which is usually how that works.
No kidding.
I spoke with him, and he has no intention of having anything to do with the people charged. And neither does Chief Sack, or neither does the fishermen of Sabaganagadie that were there.
You know, lots of people, I remember the time I stopped buying lobster. It's, you know, not like I live on lobster. It's, you know, they wouldn't notice me boycotting by any stretch. But, you know, at the same time, it's like a lot of people wanting to support the Mi'kmaq harvesters. You know, can we buy their lobster, or are they allowed to sell it? I mean, it's a moderate livelihood. Are they only selling it locally? Is it something? Is there discussion that they would sell it to a broader market?
I think that's a great idea, and I have asked about that. I asked when this first started. Chief Sack said that one thing at a time, and that would be later on. Technically, they cannot sell it because it is not recognized by the DFO. So when you harvest lobster, you take it to a lobster pound where it's weighed and priced out, and then the fisherman is paid. The lobster pound sells that lobster to a company like Clearwater, or another company, a food company, which will sell it to restaurants or grocery stores, and then you purchase it, of course. You know, there are Canadian food regulations, which I'm not too familiar with, but, you know, same as beef or potatoes or vegetables or what have you, it is regulated by Health Canada. So this lobster is not, so it cannot be sold.
Gotcha. And speaking of Clearwater, so in the midst of all of this that was going on in the lobster with the lobster fishers in Atlantic Canada, the seafood giant Clearwater is bought by Mi'kmaq, and we were all like, "Well, that was a TSN turning point. I don't think a lot of us saw coming." What's going on? What's happening with Clearwater now that the Mi'kmaq own that giant?
Well, when Clearwater was first bought, that was probably a couple months after the treaty fishery was launched by Sabaganagadie. And I spoke with Chief Terry Paul of Member 2 First Nation, who was the lead of that purchase. And he said, for the first while, the company is going to run as is, with the same board of directors and the same managers, and, you know, until the Mi'kmaq get used to the company, learn the company. And then he said, eventually, the intent was to employ more Mi'kmaq people. Clearwater has been going to communities, Mi'kmaq communities, and holding seminars and developing training sessions for Mi'kmaq, and all types of positions, from fishermen, captain, deckhands, to mechanics. I recently saw there was administrative jobs posting, and they've been traveling around the province, and I've not been able to meet up with them yet. I intend to because of COVID. So there is some movement there. You know, they're very excited to employ a lot of people, and as a corporate aspect of the fishery.
I can't wait to see how that all shakes down as Clearwater, as they get kind of into the meat and potatoes, I guess, of the lobster industry there. Mm-hmm. So now we're switching gears. The baby eel fishery. What is this? I mean, I didn't know there was a difference between traditional eels and baby eels. If you could explain to us Westerners.
Yeah, exactly. Neither did I till I moved out here. Traditional eels is the large-side eels, which is a traditional Mi'kmaq dish, a favorite amongst elders. And I was recently out on the ice on Indigenous Harbor with a couple of fishermen from Pictou Landing First Nation that were harvesting the eels, and they use long spears, which they have traditionally, and they harvest the eels, and it's for their own food and ceremony. Mm-hmm. And apparently it takes an eel about 15 or 20 years to reach maturity. The baby eels, they're called elvers, and they're very, very tiny, and they almost look like glass, and they almost look like worms.
So the baby eel fishery, they're harvesting these to sell, and it's apparently a really lucrative market. Who's buying, and how much do you make selling baby eels?
Well, they're sold to China, and where they're kept until they reach maturity. And so it is extremely lucrative. I was told that one night you can harvest up to about $200,000, but that might be on a good night. Damn. But it is very, very lucrative. The elver fishery is controversial within the Mi'kmaq. Some say that that is not a traditional fishery, and others say they have a right to harvest the elvers as part of the treaty fishery. So there is a division. Some Mi'kmaq I've spoken to are concerned about the sustainability of the elver fishery. As like I said, it can take up to 20 years for an eel to mature. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It is extremely lucrative, and some people have interpretations of treaty rights. There was treaty rights back in the 1700s when the peace and friendship treaties were signed, and some people are saying, well, treaty rights grow and change to what we have today and how we live today. So I think this elver fishery will be more definitive of how we see treaty rights today as compared to the lobster. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans are now discussing increasing commercial elver harvesting for the Mi'kmaq, and they would do that by lowering the quota on the non-Indigenous commercial fishermen. That is still in the discussions, though. Nothing is final. One way they were going to do it is buy licenses from non-Indigenous fishermen, but that didn't quite work out, so now they're looking at cutting the quotas.
Well, certainly lots to be watching for over on the East Coast with various fisheries, whether we're talking baby eels, traditional eels, lobster, big lobster harvest out at deep sea or in small coves. There's a lot. You've got your hands full. For a prairie girl, you've become an Atlantic fish expert from the looks of it. Angel, we're thankful that you could take time to kind of update us on what's going on out there, and we always look forward to the stories that you bring us from Mi'kmaq.
Thank you very much.
All right, so as Angel and Melissa just talked about, let's take a look at a story about traditional eel fishing with Mi'kmaq harvesters on the ice of the north shore of Nova Scotia. Now, this type of eel fishing is different than the baby eel trade. It is a traditional Mi'kmaq dish. Here's that story from earlier this year.
The spear is about 14 feet long. It reaches the mud at the bottom of the harbor where the American eels are nestled. Dernie Nicholas hooks one. The American eel, gad in Mi'kmaq, is a traditional food and used in ceremony. Nicholas, taught by his elders, explains the process.
Go things around again, then you move up again, and getting further away. Then you finish, and then you go in the next hole, you make one, and just like that all day.
A.J. Francis, Nicholas's nephew, gave me a lesson. Stab the mud in a circle around the ice hole to hook an eel. I had no luck. Both men of Pictou Landing First Nation are commercial fishermen, and off-season they ice fish on the Indigenous Harbor, located about 200 kilometers northeast of Halifax, a family tradition important to Francis.
Yeah, when we hunt and fish in the off-season, it's not really for money, just for our way of life and keeping our traditions alive, hunting and fishing.
Nicholas was able to catch a couple of eels and called it a day. Back at Nicholas's shed,
we're going to clean some eels, catch today. A couple of big ones. Good size.
The eel is sliced, partly gutted, and the skin is pulled off.
I'm going to salt it and tan it, and I'll make something out of it.
Nicholas says the skin is strong, enough to support a broken bone.
One time I'm going to make, like somebody got broken arm or leg, they wrap around there, just like a strong, like a cast.
The meat can be baked, fried, or boiled. One tradition Nicholas taught his nephew.
He's been my mentor when I was younger. I got my first tuna with Durney, and I got my first moose with Durney. Yeah.
But this harvest and the traditions associated with it could be at risk. Because back on the ice, Nicholas's first catch of the day was too small. Nicholas put it back in the water. It can take 20 years for an eel to mature. Francis ice fishes with his uncle every winter. He's noticed a decline in eels in the last few years.
Over time, like we used to get a lot of big eels. It was easy to get, plentiful, and over the years they're kind of declining a little bit, and it's harder, fewer and fewer bigger ones, and I just noticed that myself over the years.
According to the Government of Canada website, in 2012, the American eel was a species at risk due to pollution, dams, and existing fisheries. The last report on American eels was in 2019, but how the stocks are doing was inconclusive due to lack of data. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans did not respond to an interview request. Meanwhile, Nicholas and Francis will keep eeling and hunting until the commercial fishery starts in the spring. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Antigonish Harbour, Nova Scotia.
All right, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we speak to a moose hunter who wants to help preserve the gathering of food for future generations.
Call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to APTN In Focus. I'm Daryl Stranger, filling in for Melissa Ridgen. It was a pretty standard fall day back on September the 18th. Jordan McKay, a member of Rolling River First Nation, was out hunting for moose in the nearby Elphinstone area of Manitoba, just northwest of Winnipeg. His gun had been put away when he was approached and taken down by numerous RCMP officers. He's now charged in connection with this incident, and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs have taken up the cause, helping him fight this. He spoke with Melissa Ridgen about the ordeal earlier this year.
I was hunting down the road allowance, and there was a bull moose coming towards me, straight towards me. That road goes straight north and south. And I was waiting for it to see me so it would turn, and when it did, it turned. I shot it. It turned again, I shot it again, and it fell pretty much right where it was standing. Mm-hmm. And there's a house just across the river to the east, and a vehicle. I walked back to get my truck, and I pulled up to where the moose was, and I was on my phone texting a couple of my family members to come and help me. And this vehicle pulled up behind me and asked if I was shooting at his house, and I said no. I was raised to not point my gun in any direction of anybody or any house or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I told him I was shooting straight to the north, and there was nothing. That road just comes to an end at the north.
Just to be clear, just so to remind our audience, so you were on a road that goes north-south, like on a road allowance, I guess, that goes north-south. You shot a moose facing north. This person had felt that you were shooting at their house that was across the river on the east. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you explained to him, no, I was shooting that moose. It's over there. What happened after that?
He asked where I was from. I told him Rolling River Reserve. And he said, okay, and he left. And he said, as long as I wasn't shooting at his house, and I said, no, I wasn't. So he left. I texted my family, and they said they would be out there. So I pulled my truck up, and I tied up one of the legs of that moose to the back of my truck, and I was cutting it up. Maybe about half an hour went by. I heard a vehicle pull up behind me, so I put all my stuff down. I got up, I went to my truck and grabbed my cigarettes. And I heard somebody yelling at me to put my hands up.
Where was your gun at that point?
My gun was already in my truck. It was unloaded. It was nowhere near, like I was done with it, so it was put away. So I didn't even get in the truck. I was just reaching in to grab my cigarettes, and I heard somebody yelling at me to put my hands up. And when I looked, there was 2 RCMP vehicles sitting there with assault rifles pointed at me. So I put my cigarettes down, I put my phone down, I put my hands up, I showed them I wasn't holding anything. They told me to walk towards them, so I started walking towards them. And about halfway between my truck and the RCMP vehicle, they told me to lay down face down. So I lay down, and they put me in handcuffs and told me I was being placed under arrest.
Could they see the moose at that point?
Yes, that moose was laying right behind my truck.
Right behind your truck.
You could see it perfectly. Yeah.
What were you thinking? I don't have to tell you the number of headlines that are out there of people getting shot, Indigenous people being shot by police. You're out in a field by yourself. You don't have family or anybody else there with you. You're unarmed. You have your hands up. You've got 2 assault rifles trained on you, and you're being told, walk towards them. What's going through your mind at the time?
I didn't really know what to do or what to think. All I could think was, if this is what's going to happen when I'm hunting, then why do it? It killed the whole hunting thing for me.
Have you been out since?
I tried once, but I was just looking over my shoulder the whole time.
Yeah, I think that people need to stop and think for a minute what it would be like to be out just minding your own business and then having guns trained on you and being demanded to lay on the ground. That obviously would have, that's trauma, right? What was the demeanor of the officers? They cuff you. What happens at that point?
He put me in handcuffs, and they put me in the backseat of the RCMP vehicle, and they asked if I shot twice at that guy's house, and I said no. I said I shot that moose twice. And he said, well, there's no hunting signs in the field along the road. And I said, I know. I said I wasn't shooting in the field along the road. I shot it right on the road. And he said, well, that moose probably came out of that field, so you shot somebody's moose.
You shot somebody's moose?
Yeah.
That's rich.
So yeah, I told him that it wasn't. I watched it come down the roads towards me. It wasn't. When I seen it, it wasn't in that field. It was on the road that whole time.
So did they let you go at that point, or did your family come and join you at that point? Because like you said, you'd already texted your family asking for help to come in and retrieve the moose.
Well, I found out after that they did show up, but they left when they seen the RCMP lights. And conservation officers showed up, and a park warden showed up because it was right along Riding Mountain Park. And the conservation officer came over, and the first thing he asked if I was shooting at that guy's house. And I said, no, I wasn't. And I told him what happened, that moose was coming down the road. I shot it. It fell right where it was. It didn't run into the park or anything. So the park warden just walked away and left. Mm-hmm. And then they moved me from the RCMP vehicle to the conservation officer truck. I was still in handcuffs for about 2 hours, and then the conservation officer came and he got in the truck and he said the RCMP were leaving. They were going to take their handcuffs off me and that they would be leaving, and they're not charging me with anything because they had nothing to charge me with, but he had to charge me with something. So I ended up getting fined $2,500 for shooting a bull moose and shooting off of a public road.
And they took your gun?
Like $400. Yeah, and they seized my rifle.
So what's happened since then? So you leave that day, obviously, shaken by this entire ordeal.
I went to see my family that was originally supposed to come and help me that day. I went and seen them, and I showed them, I told them what happened, I showed them the papers. And then, yeah, we talked to the chief, and he's the one that said to get back to him, because he was going to get a hold of AMC. And then it's just gone to court a couple times now. And the Crown has offered a deal to drop a little bit of the fine, I guess, and give my rifle back.
So you'd still be, they're not dropping the charge or anything, they would reduce the fine for you, they're saying. They'll give you your rifle back. So, I mean, I guess before we get back to like where things are now and when you're back to court next, before I get to that, you know, is this, what's been the history of, in your community, of harvesters from Rolling River, you know, butting heads with police or conservation officers in the area, or other, you know, land occupants in the area, settlers in the area? What's kind of been the history there? Has there been problems before this?
None that I remember anybody saying anything. Like this road I've been on, surrounding reserves hunt on that road, and I've never heard of any issues.
So you had said that, you know, the RCM... Sorry, finish your thought there.
Sorry. Like my uncle that told me I could always hunt there, he's been hunting there for years. And I remember going there when I was a little kid. And there's never been an issue. When does this go back to court? You know, and we'd said that the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs stepped in. They're paying for your lawyer for this, you know, saying that this is about protecting you know, everybody's harvesting rights. When are you back in court, and what happens next? I don't know. This was just, I think yesterday or the day before, my lawyer contacted me and told me that it will be set in place for the next court date to dispute.
Why are you doing this?
I don't want anything like this to happen to my nephews or any other young people that are coming up learning how to hunt or doing anything. Like I said, we always see videos of these Native people being shot that are unarmed. This could have been a whole different story if it went the other way.
Well, I'm sure that would have been going through your head too at that moment, or maybe even not at the exact moment, but certainly afterwards when you look back at that really could have gone a whole different way for you. Jordan, I really thank you for taking the time to share that story with us. That can't be easy to recount. What you went through, and we are going to be following this story until it comes to a close, so thanks for sharing.
Now, as we mentioned, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is fighting this. Jordan McKay's lawyer, Eliza Lulgy, says they won't accept any fine at all because he was hunting on an undeveloped road allowance, not a roadway. Now, his moose was taken, as was his gun, and a court date is set for next December, and we will be keeping an eye on that. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we head west to the coast of Vancouver Island to talk about salmon farms. Welcome back to APTN In Focus. I'm Daryl Stranger, filling in for Melissa Ridgen. Now, on the topic of moose hunting, let's not forget what's going on in Quebec with the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation members erecting barricades to stop sport hunting on their territory. The Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation members erected barricades last fall to stop sport hunting on their territory. They say it's putting the moose population in jeopardy and battling the province and non-Indigenous hunters. It's been an ongoing issue for a long time now, and progress is slow. Nouvelle Nationale reporter Shushan Bécon checked in with them. Here's her story, translated by Lindsay Richardson.
These dramatic images are from last autumn, when the Anishinaabe Nation in Quebec mobilized to stop moose sport hunting on their territory. Blocking access roads to the La Vérendrye Wildlife Reserve generated serious consequences, such as verbal and physical violence from non-Indigenous sports hunters. A year later, it's much more tranquil here. But that doesn't mean that the harassment has stopped. These photos show pieces of moose found discarded on the edge of a forest path. Parts of the moose most Anishinaabe would never waste. Charles Radd says it isn't even the worst.
I've been hearing stories from individuals that were escorted and harassed by non-native hunters in the Zex outside the park. You know, and these are women and children that are being harassed and escorted out with guys with guns on four-wheelers. You know, this is still happening.
Last June, a 2-year moratorium on moose hunting was signed by the Anishinaabe and Quebec. According to Lucien Wabananik, a negotiator for a coalition of Anishinaabe communities in the region, the 2-year period will be used to study the state of the moose population. This work will be done in collaboration with Anishinaabe elders from different communities, as well as Quebec's Ministry of Forests.
Pour nous, l'objectif, c'est d'avoir un meilleur contrôle, une meilleure participation dans tous les niveaux décisionnels possibles. Donc, l'objectif, c'est d'avoir un contrôle de la réserve faunique de la Vérandrie par les Anishinaabe, soit une création, soit un partenariat avec la CEPAC ou soit éliminer la CEPAC. On n'est pas nécessairement rendu là.
But one Anishinaabe community is not part of the negotiation table concerning the moose moratorium. Radd is disappointed that the Band Council of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake, or ABL for short, have withdrawn from the negotiation table on the moose population.
This chief and council that's in ABL right now does not represent us. They do not speak to us, they don't consult us, they don't tell the people nothing.
What the Barrier Lake Band Council has done instead is sign its own framework agreement with Quebec. Their framework agreement also includes a 2-year moratorium on moose sport hunting, but it's also asking Quebec to commit to finish negotiating an implementation agreement. According to Chief Tony Wawati, this would help the Algonquins of Barrier Lake have a say on forestry cuts on their territory and also benefit from it.
And we need those economic opportunities for ourselves. And, you know, by signing such an agreement, it'll help, you know, build our economy. It'll help build, you know, the non-native economy, the regional economy. So those are the things that we have to take a look at, you know, enough of this piecemeal approach. You know, we can't just live on programs and services.
For now, the moratorium for moose hunting for the 2021 and 2022 seasons has been established. Harassment aside, this can be considered a victory for Anishinaabe who depend on moose for food. But what will happen in 2 years when the moratorium is lifted and the moose population has not increased?
We'll still be here in the end. We're still going to do the same stuff. For us, if nothing is done, you know, we see no action on the ground, we will be taking action again come the end of this moratorium that Quebec has signed with the Algonquin chiefs.
A story by Shashan Bacon, APTN National News, La Vérandrie Wildlife Reserve, Quebec.
And a quick update now. Since this story went to air, a grassroots organization called the Algonquin Moose Research Committee has been formed. Using traditional and scientific methods, their goal is to gather their own data about the moose population in the region separately from both Quebec and Band councils. They intend to produce their report this coming autumn. And to British Columbia now, where farms containing Atlantic salmon are quite controversial. Many nations harvest the wild Pacific salmon for food and ceremony and say the fish farms are killing them off. Now, some First Nations have stopped hosting farms on their land altogether, while others want to keep them for economic reasons. Independent biologist and Namgis First Nation science advisor Alexandra Morton has been studying Pacific salmon for decades. For her, there is only one reality: where there are farms, the fish suffer. She joins me now. Like we just mentioned, we're talking about salmon here now. Now, there's been a lot of developments in the last few years on this. So what is the most significant development for you here?
Have largely removed salmon farms from their territories because the impacts became so apparent. DFO never did really move to protect wild salmon from all the disease coming out of these farms. So a number of First Nations just took it into their own hands. But now there's a court case, so the companies, it's just 3 Norwegian-run companies basically that are the industry here. They've sued the Minister of Fisheries, trying to get the farms put back. And it's an unusual situation because First Nations, environmentalists, and the minister are all on one side of the table, and the fish farmers are now by themselves. Previously, the minister always sat with the fish farmers. But the battle lines now are on the west coast of Vancouver Island because all the salmon farm licenses, federal licenses, are about to expire this summer, most of them on June 30th. And that gives First Nations the options to request consultation, because everyone who has salmon farms is seeing their wild salmon stocks crash to levels that nobody thought was possible. But some nations have decided that they do want aquaculture. So it's not a clear issue at the moment, but we'll just have to see what happens as each nation makes their decision whether to allow the licenses in their territories to be renewed or not.
Mm-hmm. So what does the science say in the places where these farms have been removed?
Well, so it's all very recent, but last year I went down to a place called the Discovery Islands, which is where all the salmon from the Fraser River funnel through on their way to sea after they've hatched and they come out into the ocean. And I've done this for 20 years, and the fish have always been covered with lice and emaciated and dying. But last year they were so beautiful. Like I realized after looking at thousands of these little fish, I didn't really know what their body shape was. They don't have flat sides. They're round and have little shadows under their bellies. They're so plump. And I pick them up each into a little baggie and I hold a hand lens. So I'm actually like looking eye to eye with these fish. And some of those salmon, the pink salmon, will be back this summer. And so I'm very curious to see how big a return we're going to get after the farms were removed.
Mm-hmm. And so, as we've said, there's a lot of division between those First Nations that want the farms and then those who do not. So what solutions do you see could there be for this divide?
Well, the division is actually in the communities. And so lots of people contact me looking for help. There is no solution to salmon farms in the ocean. We've tried everything, but the viruses, the bacteria, the lice, they just can't control them. And so, I mean, the nations that keep them are going to lose their wild fish, and maybe some have made that decision. But it's certainly, the industry could move onto land, and they could do it into tanks if you really want to raise salmon on land. But the wild salmon, once they're gone, they're gone. And so it's very difficult for the nations to navigate this. In some cases, the hereditary leaders want it. In some cases, they don't. In some cases, the elected councils want it. But the fishermen of the communities know what is going on, and they are very concerned.
So you just mentioned there might be a solution moving it to land. Can you sort of walk us through how that might help the situation?
Well, once the farm salmon are on land, all of the impacts in the oceans go away. But the 3 Norwegians here, Maui, Cermak, and Grieg, they're just not interested in doing that. It is more expensive, but it's also more long-term. I personally think raising salmon in tanks is probably not a great idea because it's like, raising wolves and eating them rather than raising deer and eating them. You're eating a top predator. But if you really want to do it, there are people all over the world that are doing it. There's businessmen that are doing it who think that they can make money because you can control the temperature and the salinity and the darkness and the pathogens and the algae blooms. But the 3 companies here just want to be able to dump everything into the ocean. And so they are putting up enormous amount of money to the nations who still have these in their territories. And they're trying a lot of things. These are very, very aggressive companies, and these are not easy choices for the leadership of nations that are facing all kinds of difficulties, for which money would be a big help. So my heart really goes out to them, but they're just not going to have wild salmon. It hasn't worked anywhere in the world. And I'm now a science advisor for Namgis, who have an agreement, and they're on the farms. They're getting rid of several farms every single year. And so I know what is going on because we're actually looking in the farms now, and it's horrendous. So, yeah, it's a difficult one.
All right. Well, Alexandra, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes here. That is all the time we have, unfortunately. But thank you so much for bearing with us through all those technical difficulties, and it's certainly something to keep an eye on in the future here.
You're welcome. People can follow me on my Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter if they want to continue the conversation. So thanks so much.
Perfect. There we go. Thank you. Now, that is all the time we have for here on In Focus. You can come back next week where I will be filling in one more time for Melissa Ridgen. We will be talking about all sports all the time. What exactly? You'll just have to tune in and find out. But as the sports guy here, I will certainly have a lot of sports for you on that episode. And this episode here will be available for download as a podcast on our website at aptnnews.ca/podcast. And if you missed any of the shows and you want to catch up, you can check out the website, aptnnews.ca. Everybody have a great Wednesday.